Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to today's webinar ASP.NET Responsive Web Design presented by DevExpress Web Program Manager Mehul Harry. In this webinar, Mehul will show you how to create responsive ASP.NET websites using DevExpress ASP.NET controls. You'll also learn how DevExpress works with the Bootstrap framework. Alright, let's join Mehul as he talks about responsive web design.
So the idea with responsive is that you have one website that allows it to change from a fixed layout. So no longer would a website have one, let's say, column at the top or one content area. Now it would go to what's called a fluid design, meaning that the content is all the same, but really the layout shifts and then changes based on the size of the screen. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. Now, I'm gonna warn you. There's quite a bit of interesting things to show off here. Just when you get into the definition of responsive and adaptive. So I don't want to spend too much time because it's a bit of a rabbit hole. Let's take a quick look at a couple of sites. Now, Microsoft.com is interesting because as you see on a desktop, we've got this giant hero graphic right in the middle. And when you look at a full screen, they're advertising, their Surface right in the middle. And as it goes down to tablet size, you can see their content is starting to shift. As you can see, the image is also changing, but the content itself is starting to move around. And as I go further down, the content has now completely changed, as well as the menu, as well as the layout. Now this is more akin to an adaptive design. So, and I'll get right into, I'll try to explain as best as I can between responsive and adaptive. Now, responsive means that the content is all the same and it responds to the changes. And this mostly happens on the client side, meaning at client side, there are CSS media queries that are changing and responding to the size of the screen. Adaptive goes a little bit further. The idea with adaptive really started with something called progressive enhancement, where you would start from a very small screen, so you design for the phone, like a mobile-first approach, and then you progressively enhance. You add on based on the larger screen sizes. But really, those decisions were based at server side. So at server side, it would say, oh, I'm here on an iPhone, so I don't have to use a fluid layout. I might just display a fixed layout for this particular 360 by whatever pixel size. So the server would make that decision. But honestly, even in late 2014, it's gotten very confusing. So my suggestion to you is that if you really want to try to figure out the difference, you could. Just know that it gets a little muddy. Adaptive in general is kind of what you want. You want to go for a bit of a combination of both, where you get the benefit of adaptive, where the benefit of responsive, where the layouts are fluid, and adaptive because you can target using breakpoints what items will get hidden, what will get shown. So for example, same thing here on The Verge. You see at The Verge, on a desktop screen, they've got this nice layout. And they even said, on a wide enough screen, we don't care. We're going to go for this 1,000 pixel wide layout. And as it starts going down, they start making some decisions on, okay, we're going to hide the menu. Okay, we're going to hide this. We're going to go to a list style approach. So you can see each site will have their own approach to this. So I apologize if the explanation wasn't real clear, but I have a ton of links that I've collected if you are interested in this kind of information. So there's a great guy out there named Luke W. who has a great blog, and he's been talking about this for years. And he talks about fluid design. So fluid design starts for something like this, and as you lose screen size, you can see that it starts making decisions saying, well, this is resizable, but it's going to become the top content, and the rest of this stuff will get pushed down. So fluid design kind of works like that. And a sort of adaptive design may work where you say like, okay, I have one, in this case this is actually responsive, but it would actually decide based on the size of the screen to actually just display a completely different layout. So Let's leave that alone for now and move on. Okay, so in responsive, as we said, it changes the fluid layout. In adaptive, it's very close as well, but it uses sort of a server-side approach. Now, it's odd to say server-side because ASP.NET is all server-side, and that's why I didn't want to get too hung up on the definitions between the two. The good news is we are supporting what we call responsive, adaptive, and so let's just dive right into the code because there's a lot to show. So the first thing I want to talk about is the DevExpress story. Now, I've put together a simple little web forms example here for you. I promise you it's not too complicated. I've got a site master page with a menu in it, and I've got a default ASPX page that's got a grid and some other pages that derive off that master page. So what's happening is, in my example here, here's my menu. And the reason I created this particular example was for many months, people would ask, hey, what is the DevExpress story with responsive? And one of the things I have always maintained was responsive was a site-level decision. So at the site level, it would decide, okay, I'm at this resolution, so I'm going to change my layout. And so there have been frameworks like Bootstrap and so forth that handled those media queries for you. Now, we make a set of controls. So we have supported responsive, I should say, behavior that allowed you to use our controls in responsive-based frameworks easily. So what does that mean? Well, for example, the grid has been resizable for many years. So it supported things like width equals 100%. So as I resize, you can see that the grid resizes with me. Now, if I had a lot more columns, that would become a little more difficult. And so there are decisions you can still make yourself. Now, as we've gone forward and made more controls, for example, the ribbon control that we've created recently, we created that with responsive in mind, so that as I resize, you can see that the ribbon automatically resizes. So all controls that derive off of this ribbon control, like rich edit, spreadsheet, get that benefit as well. So for example, here in full screen mode, you can see that the ribbon, as I resize, adapts automatically. So it's a fantastic feature and one that's built right into the control. And other newer controls that we're creating, like our image controls and even our older controls like the data view controls that have been updated, these controls easily support responsive behavior. So my recommendation to you is that if you are looking to get responsive support from DevSpace controls, the good news is we've supported it. But I have waited to really tell the story because I wanted to have a more complete story. And so the full story is now we have a new control that actually allows you at the site level to make those decisions about what content will get displayed so that you can manage how your website, your ASP.NET website, looks and behaves on different devices. So you can actually now finally have a true tablet story, a true phone story. Now, the way we're going to do this, sorry, the way we are supporting this is using a new, not a new control, an existing control called our ASPX panel control. So let's take a look in Visual Studio. Now, the DevExpress, if you look at panel, you'll find that Microsoft has a panel control, and I want you to be sure you don't use this control, and that's just a simple container control. And our panel control used to be very much like that. Our panel control was a simple container control with some client-side events. And then there's also the callback panel, which also supports responsive, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But the main one you want to be using is the ASPX panel control. So the ASPX panel control is still a container control, but we've upgraded it to add support for responsive behavior. And so what it does is now allows you to control things like when something gets collapsed, when a menu is displayed, and so forth. So let's just take a look at this. Now, we saw from our example that my website here really, it doesn't look very good. When I get down to this level, in fact, let's use our browser tools, And I believe there's a nice tool, sorry, not in there. There's a nice responsive tool in Firefox. So this allows me to choose, for example, this might be the new iPhone. This might be somebody's awesome, 30-inch iMac or something like that. But we get the idea. So this might be a tablet. But at the phone level, my website does not look good at all. My menu gets crunched up. My title bar, it looks very odd. The grid, I may not even want to use a grid. I may want to be just looking at this image gallery. But this is not the optimal experience. So let's optimize our site. And the easiest way is in my site.master page, I've got this menu. And I've got a content placeholder where items like default, image gallery, and those other pages are loaded. So really what I want to do is I want to make sure this menu control is hidden and it changes into something like a mobile menu. So let's use our panel control to do that. Now, you can work in either design view or source view. Sometimes I start off in this source view and then I move over to the other one. So here's the content placeholder, and here's my panel. So the first thing I want to do is I want to move this into the panel. And then I want to change the width of the panel. So let's change the width of the panel to 100%. Now, the other thing is I want to change how what position I keep it in, because currently the menu gets hidden as I scroll down the website. So what I'm going to do is I want to make it sticky, and I'm going to use this fixed position property. Now the fixed position gives you 5 options like none, top, bottom, left. I'm going to choose top, and this allows it to stick to the top. Now there's also a fixed position overlap, and this is simply because if you have panels at the top and bottom and the left and right, the ones at the top and bottom will overlap the ones on the left and right, but if you want to overwrite that behavior, you can use this overlap property. But for now, let's go with this approach. Now, let's take a look at this in the browser. All I've done so far is add one panel control, and immediately my menu now is stuck to the top, and as I scroll down, my items are still there. And because I've set it to a width of 100%, it's still sticky for all other platforms as well. But I want to make sure that this header also sticks with it as well. So let's move that header up in there. Now I'll do that through the source. And now, when we take a look at this in the browser, we'll see that our menu also sticks with us at the very top. So just by adding the new control, oops, I think I've undone a little bit too much here. Let's save it here. Go back to design view. All right. All right, so I think I've accidentally undone a little bit of Visual Studio magic here. So let's make sure. Okay. For some reason, our panel's not getting updated. So let me just add another panel real quick here.
Hey, Mehul, you're getting some suggestions that the fixed position is gone.
I see. Okay. So I've undone the
Yes.
magic of the fixed position. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Thanks very much, Amanda. So let's keep it simple, and that's actually like my life motto. And if we go back here, so you can see I've in my Control Z madness, I've undone the Windows top. So let's do that and take a look at this again in the browser. And now we've got a much better layout. Now, but the thing is, you can see at mobile levels, this sucks. This is not the approach that I want to do. So what I want to do is display a mobile menu. So let's do that. So at this level, I should be able to show a menu similar to this, the hamburger style menu. And to get that, it's very easy. So we have added a property called collapsible. So in the ASPX panel, you can simply set the collapsible property to true. And just with that one property, you get this mobile menu, the hamburger menu, or sometimes it's called strips. It's got a lot of different names. So what's great about it is now, just by doing that, and setting a couple of properties, one panel control, I've got a mobile menu. And when I expand it, you can see I've got the close button and open button. And when I open it, I've also got a nice animation that drops it down. It overlays it on top of my content. And we even give you options. So for example, if you don't like this overlay, you can have it slide down or something like that. Now, that's great for mobile, but as you can see, it keeps that items collapsed all the time, and I don't want to do that. What I want to do is have it collapse only when I'm at the mobile level. So we even give you control over this. So in the panel control, if you go down to settings adaptivity, you'll find a couple of new settings in here as well. Settings adaptivity and settings collapsing. Now in collapsing, we give you options for how the expand effect might be, some of the animation types and so forth. You have things like pop up and slide, but we're going to concentrate on this adaptivity ones. This is where you have actual control. So I can tell it, hey, listen, when the window inner width is less than 700 pixels, I want you to collapse it. And because we've said collapsible is true, then it'll give us that menu. So let's see this in effect. So here, I've got it on a nice big screen. But as I get down to small tablets and phone levels, you can see the menu immediately appears right as I collapse. So this now has adapted to a mobile device, right? And it happens using CSS media queries. And what's great is this panel extension is using semantic markup. It's not using tables, using divs. And I'll talk a little bit about some demos that we updated and some benefits we saw out of that a little later. But now you can see this is great. But here, when I expand the menu in the expanded mobile menu still doesn't look good. So we even give you options. So because DevExpress controls are very customizable using templates, we even give you new templates inside for adaptivity. So there are 3 new templates for expand bar, expand button, and expanded. The expanded template is what we're going to use. So what I'll do is first I'm going to take this menu, and you can see it's basically just a static menu with some items in it. And I'm going to copy that into the, oops, not the menu. We're going to copy this into the panel expanded template. We're going to paste it in here. And now this is an exact copy of the menu, but I'm going to change one key thing, and that's orientation. So instead of a horizontal orientation, I'm going to say use a vertical orientation when the expanded items are shown. So instead of showing the regular item that we were showing with the header, I'm going to show just the template contents, which is the same menu but in a vertical orientation. So let's see how this looks in the browser. All right, so first we'll start off with our regular view. We've got the menu, and as I collapse, I've got the mobile menu now. And when I expand the mobile menu, I now have a much friendlier menu that works much better for mobile. So as you can see, it's fantastic. Now, I may want to go a little bit further and say, well, my header is gone. Where's my company name up here and so forth, right? So what we do is we help you even with that using the what's called the expand bar template. So if we go to the edit templates for the panel, and we give you what the expanded bar template is. So in here, I can put in a header. Now, I threw just some text in there because instead of a text, a set of text items, what I want to do, Well, we can copy the text. Let's see the problem with the text, and I kind of want to show you here. Text is fine. So now, whether I have regular menu with a header, or as I collapse, I've got the mobile menu, I still got the header, which is great, and it keeps it, right? This is the mobile approach that I want. The only problem is, as I get really small, I can see my header is a bit long there, so I could maybe make it shorter. But the approach I generally like to say is, use like something like a logo. So here, let's use a image, and well, actually, let's throw it here, and I'll use the DevExpress ASPX image control. Now here, I've got some images in here already, and I'll just use that one from DevAV. This is actually in our demos, and you can take a look at these. And now we can just copy this image over to the expanded bar template as well. And just like that, we have a much better site. So now, as you can see, the logo works a lot better. Now, I may want to add some padding around that. And if you don't have design skills, don't worry. You can go to websites like Fiverr.com and stuff and hire a designer for $5 to make you logos and all that good stuff. Now, beyond just this panel control, we've also, in this release, updated our pager control. Now, this pager control is used extensively in our controls like our grid view, our data view, in many, many controls. So what this allows you to do is go into the pager properties of this specific, let's go into default. So let's take a look at the ASPX grid view. If you go to settings.pager, you'll find a new property called enable adaptivity. And if you set it to true, which I have done here, you'll find that when your site is collapsed and you have a set of links for pager, that the pager itself will adapt. And you can see it went from showing a links of page numbers to just buttons on the left and right. So the grid view itself has gotten smarter, as well as any other control that uses this. So I would say the DevExpress story for responsive is fantastic, and it's only gotten better in this release. So you can see how easy this is. You can make decisions on how and what content gets displayed, because really with a responsive website, that's what it comes down to, is you have less real estate and you have to make decisions on what to keep displayed. And we have even gone so far as to show you what items are the most popular. So for example, this hamburger menu has now become the default menu. Originally, it was created back in the 70s at Xerox to denote something like a context menu or something like that. There's a whole story behind it if you're interested. But these days, it's synonymous. And frameworks like Bootstrap have made it popular and turned it into a web menu. And there are some studies that even talk about that, say, look, if you add the word menu, because people might not know what this is, or if you put a circle around it or a rounded square. So there's all sorts of things you can get into when you start digging into responsive. The only suggestion I'll make is don't be afraid to scroll your content. Because you have less real estate, it's okay. I mean, you saw it from the Verge example. You saw it from Microsoft example. Content is important, and just because you have less of it doesn't mean that the users aren't going to scroll. The users will absolutely scroll if there's the relevant content for them. So in the same way, you can have enough content. Just remember to always keep relevant content, the important content. For example, if we have a lot of text on our websites, I mean, we have hundreds of controls. So of course we're going to have a lot of text, because nobody ever comes to us and says, hey, you guys have too little text. Rather, they say, we didn't read enough, or we didn't know your control supported this. So it's always a battle between, how much content do we put. But we're not afraid to put that up there, because users, when they're looking for information, they want that information. But just make sure you make the right decision on, what's more important. And items like navigation, whether you have a nav bar here or a footer section, those are less important than the actual content with what they're dealing with here. And then you also want to be aware that, for example, large controls like a spreadsheet, they don't make sense on a mobile device. You can get away with it maybe on like a phablet, which is a tablet-sized phone device, like a large Note, Galaxy Note, or a iPhone 6 Plus or something like that. On those, it may work okay, but you want to be cognizant of, bandwidth concerns for mobile devices as well as screen real estate. All right. Now that was a awesome example. We even have we have a shorter version of this video on our YouTube channel. What I want to do now is I want to talk about another key thing that we've improved in this release. So now in this release, I just showed you how to take an existing web forms website that is not responsive, add a panel to it within a few minutes, and get responsive behavior. So let's see, if you don't have responsive websites today, you might think, well, I'm going to make a new website completely. I don't like my website. I designed it for IE6. You know what? IE6 is gone now. I'm going to make a new website. I've got new ideas. I've got awesome things that I'm going to borrow from Verge and all these sites. I want to do something cool. So what you can do is, if you're going to go with a new website approach, is use the DevExpress templates. And if you go to File New, you'll find our DevExpress template gallery has been updated for 14.2. And when you launch this template gallery, you get this excellent wizard. And then in this wizard, we've still got the empty web application template, and we still have the standard web application template. But we've added these new templates for MVC and web forms called responsive web application. And the difference between the old and these responsive is really the base controls that we use for layout. So the empty web applications don't do anything but just add references to DevExpress and update the web config so you can start using DevExpress controls in there. The web application template here, the standard one, is great if you're making a desktop website that does not need to worry about mobile. Yeah, actually, let me rephrase that. This template uses the DevExpress ASP.NET splitter control. And the splitter control, you may have heard me mention in other webinars, that at full screen, it supports responsive behavior. And you can do that. If you've already used this web application template at full screen mode, you'll be happy to know that you can make some decisions on it. But it will not be as good as a panel. You see, the splitter control is not based off of semantic markup like our panel control is. So it's based off of tables, which is fine. Nothing wrong with tables. It's just that the splitter serves a different function. But the panel control is absolutely targeted at helping you create websites for responsive, and you get that semantic markup. Now, you heard me mention, and I'll bring it up real quick, is that our own examples were updated. So if you go to devexpress.com and look at our Webmail client demo, and you can find this under demos, ASP.NET, and if you scroll down, you'll see this Webmail client, we have updated it. So previously, it was based off of the splitter control. So for example, this nav bar on the left side, this menu and so forth, all of it was separated by the splitter. But in this release, we have updated it for panel, and we found major improvements in performance. So if you are using it and you're wondering, hey, should I move to the panel? If you're happy with it, I would say, yeah, definitely take a look at the panel. If you're starting a new project, absolutely use the panel control. All right, so the best way to experience this is on a iPad or a tablet device, and you just see how really nice this demo is. It's based on Outlook, all sorts of good things in there. So definitely check out the Webmail client demo. All right, this new responsive web application template, let's select that. And if you run this wizard, you get a similar type of project wizard as you've seen before. But the key thing is, which I should say, the project wizard still allows you to choose which items of layout you want on your website. So for example, do you want a header area? Do you want a left area, a client area? And do you want to fill those, do you want to pre-fill those areas with a control? So for example, in the right, I can have a right area that has the cloud control in it. Or I can have a footer that has another menu in it. So there's all sorts of options you can do. I'm going to choose the default options. The only thing I'll mention here is that with the responsive, we've chosen the Moderno theme as the default. And I'll select to generate some sample data so we can see what it looks like. When I hit create project, this goes ahead and creates for me a full project, whether it's for MVC or web forms. That gives me master pages, that gives me default pages, a content folder, and if you've chosen to generate data, some app data in my app data, and also the default items for login information. So let's take a look at this in the browser. Now, we actually give you options. Somebody actually asked about changing the menu. So we actually do give you options to customize those menus and so forth. But so let's take a look and see what we've got here. At full screen, I've got a grid. As I scroll down, the grid scrolls in this nice area. I've got a nav bar here on my left side. I've got a menu here at the top. I've got my item where I can change it to either the name of the project or my company. Now, as I scroll down, you'll see the nav bar immediately collapsed. Now, take a notice here that when I highlight and expand this menu, it slides the content out and moves this content over to the right. Now, that was different behavior from what we saw when this menu was at the top. So let's keep collapsing and see what happens. Now, keep your eye on this menu here. As I collapse here, the menu also decides, hey, listen, now I'm on a mobile device, I should collapse down. Now, when I expand this, you can see it is a popover animation effect rather than a slide effect. Now, those are automatic. Those are things that we've pre-filled, but you still have options for that. And I believe we do actually give you options for customizing the image for those items. But what's great is, if you've got a new site, go with this project template, because what it does is it gives you all of these different layouts. So for example, in the root.master page, you've got the items, you've got a panel that is already set up, for example, with some default inner width. So here it's at 500 pixels. And what you can do is you can simply go ahead and customize your items and say things like, well, this is the DevExpress project, this is the panel, or you can simply go ahead and just customize and leave the default controls in there and not have to worry about how to go ahead and set them up. It's a way to quick start and get a responsive website up and running, I would say, in a less than a couple of hours. So definitely take a look at our new site. And in the default page, you'll see that all you need to worry about is, what's my main content? Is it a grid view? Is it a list view? There's a lot of different things you can do. Now, I'll address one thing, especially, you know what, I'll talk about our future plans. You definitely want to stay till the end, because at the end, I'm going to mention that we're not done with responsive. We have some other great ideas, and I'll talk about those at the end. Instead, now, let me jump into MVC. And I'm going to get through MVC rather quickly. So let me bring up the MVC version of that. I'm going to show you, typically whenever I show these demos, I just show web forms, and people are always like, Mohul, why are you always showing web forms? Honestly, web forms is just widely popular. But here you can see I've got a similar website to the web forms demo. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that if I expand and collapse, I've got the same problem. So how do I add a panel to an MVC site? And here you can see I've got some div, I've got the menu in the same way. So I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but the key thing here to remember is, for MVC, if you ever want to add a DevExpress control, remember, there's no designer in MVC. That's by design. Microsoft made a choice. MVC does not need a designer, and likely will never have a designer. So, that's just a design choice of the platform. But we help you, though. We try to make it a little bit easier. And when I right-click, I can go Insert DevExpress MVC Extension, and I can use the DevExpress dialog that comes up that allows you to insert just about any extension. Now, you can data bind them if you already have some existing controllers and stuff. What I'm going to use is I'm going to go to the Navigation Layout tab, and I'll go to Panel. Now, I've got some items here for, as you remember, collapsible, expand effect. I'm only going to set the window position to top, and then I'll hit Insert. Now, it added the panel extension for me. Now, I cannot just add the panel extension by itself, because what happens is in MVC, because you're actually inserting control here, what you want to do is you want to use the settings.setContent method. So here I'm going to here, let me make it a little easier for you guys. We need to add a little bit of fluent code here that defines what's going to get into that set content here. So the thing is, basically, we are going to say, hey, listen, in my set content, I'm going to set what content goes into this panel here. So what we're going to do is inside the set content, we actually want to write some HTML. So what I'm going to use what's called the view context .writer.write method to write out some code. Oops. Now, this is where we're going to add our div tags, our header and our opening and closing div tags. So, for example, we can move the closing div tag here, and then we can move this opening div tag up here. Now, let's just clean this up a little bit, just to let it know we've got a string and we've got quotes. So we gotta escape those, either escape those or put them as double quotes. Now, the menu itself we don't have to worry about, because the menu has already, we already moved that in there. So the menu is already escaped, and with this razor code. So what I'm going to do is I can simply move that into the middle here. And one key thing is, instead of get HTML, I want to use the render method, because we're rendering this inside of another control. Now, let me make sure I've got there we go. All right, now let's take a look at this in the browser. Now, typically, I don't like to get too much into code, but sometimes you just got to look at code to kind of understand it. So here, now, using the panel extension, I've got the sticky capability. And now, as we did with our other example, you can go ahead. Now, this is one of those things that is great about DevExpress, is that you have similar sets of properties between our different platforms. So it makes it really easier. So when you're moving from web forms to MVC, you'll be happy to know that the same type of items are there. So now we've got the collapsible property right there. So you can see the collapsible is there, doesn't look so great. And as we did, what we're going to do is use the templates. So let's use the settings.expanded template. And as you can see, we've got those same template items here as for you as well. So we're going to use the settings.template here. And to do that, you've got to use a little more fluent code here. All right. Actually, it doesn't matter what you call this, but we'll call it C. And we're going to move our menu in here. Same exact menu. And as you remember, we're only going to change the orientation property. So now, we simply need to say s.orientation is equal to orientation.vertical. IntelliSense is great, isn't it? Okay, so now, oops. Okay, so one key thing here, especially in MVC, when you got I've copied an extension, but I didn't rename it. So I want to be careful, because I've got two extensions with the same name. So let's call this something like vertical. All right, now we can see that we've got a much better menu here, but I'm still missing that top bar item there. So let's add that back in. And as you remember, that was simply using the expanded template. Now, for the sake of time, I'll make this easy on you guys by not making you watch me write a bunch of code, but it's simple. So we've got the set expanded bar template content, and we've got the header content in there. So in the same manner as we did with web forms, we've got a responsive site. Now, one key thing here is that I've got it collapsible all the time. So the other thing you may want to do, as we did in the other example, is set a collapsible inner width. So let's use settings adaptivity dot collapse at window inner width is equal to, let's say, 700. So now we've got the same type of effect. I've got a regular site. Now I've got a mobile site. It's fantastic. Now I still recommend, rather than text, you may want to have a combination of text and an image or something like that. All right, that's great. Now let's talk about the final demo I want to show you is about Twitter Bootstrap. So Twitter Bootstrap started as a project at Twitter, and you can find it at getbootstrap.com. Now, the key thing to remember about Bootstrap is basically Twitter wasn't written with Bootstrap, but a couple of developers inside of Twitter created this framework because they saw a lot of developers internally for internal projects who would make custom solutions or use different platforms, and they said, no, guys, listen, we need to standardize, and we can get better if you're just making a quick site. Use this. And so what Bootstrap did was gave developers the ability to get responsive behavior out of the box. And it's really quite nice. And it's got its, like any framework, anytime you choose a framework, you have to learn about that framework and how it works, right? So Bootstrap has, for example, a bit of a learning curve as well. I don't think it's horrible. You can find videos on YouTube on how to learn it, but it's based on a fluid grid system as well as our most responsive sites. So what's great is Twitter is open source, and because it's been around quite a few years, it works with things like Bower and Grunt, which are these client-side tools. But what's important here is that Bootstrap gives you the ability. Now, I should show you. So, for example, let's take a look at the website itself. Bootstrap.com itself is based on its own framework. So as I collapse, you can see the menu up top gets collapsed. The content is changing around. And as you can see, you've got a similar menu. And when I open it, it's got a slide down effect. Now you can see, when we created our panel, we were inspired by this. We took the best of many different frameworks. So, and we didn't just say, well, we're going to make our stuff work with Bootstrap, because many of you may not be using Bootstrap. Many of you may be using Bootstrap. What I wanted to do was have a story that said, listen, whether they use a framework or not, let's allow them to get responsive behavior, and the panels allow you to do that. Now, the difference is, if you are using Bootstrap, you probably don't need our panels, and this is where the custom story, the story with DevExpress controls being responsive comes in. I would say DevExpress controls can be responsive in that they can be resized and so forth, but they're not necessarily adaptive. And that's a story we're going to work on in the future, meaning like adaptive means that the control changes into something else. And we have some ideas there in the future. But what's great is that you can use DevExpress controls in Bootstrap today. And what does that mean? Well, it basically means if you're using Bootstrap, you can start adding controls to it. Now, why would you use Bootstrap? Well, let's take a look. A couple of releases ago, Microsoft, in their file new project template, started using Bootstrap. So this is Microsoft's template, and whether you use Web Forms MVC doesn't matter. I'll just remove the authentication. But basically, if you use a Microsoft template now, what happens is when they generate a set of files and master pages for you, they tell you that, hey, listen, this application is using Bootstrap. And so let's take a look at this exactly, and we'll take a look at this in a bigger browser. So here they described all about what their Bootstrap means, and they get right into, they link right to Bootstrap. And the reason they chose Bootstrap and not some other framework is at that time Bootstrap, and it probably still is one of the most popular frameworks for getting responsive. The pro is you get responsive behavior built right into it. The negative is that your site could look like a lot of other people's websites. Now, for myself, a couple of years ago when they came out with this, I said, yeah, let me play with it. So for one of my websites, I actually use Bootstrap, and it's fun. I throw my web experiments on there, and you can see I get responsive behavior out of the box, and it's fine. But it looks just like every other website. So if you're concerned about that, Bootstrap may not make sense for you, and you may say, well, I'll go with my panel example from DevExpress. So what's great about Bootstrap, though, is there is a large community of people using it out there. It is open source, so for example, there isn't a dedicated company behind it, but like I said, if you are very much in the open source scene, it's a great front-end framework for it. And there are people who have made themes for it. So for example, these themes actually didn't even exist when DevExpress made their our ASP.NET controls. So my suggestion to you is that, if you're using the two, well, let's see what it's like to use the two. Let's use this new project from Microsoft. So here, I've got this layout, and as I mentioned, they use a 12-column fluid grid example. And what's great is that in the main content area, you can have many columns. And here, what they do, the way you work with it is rather than working with controls and properties, you're working with semantic markup, and then you decorate it with some attributes like class equals call MD4. Now, this is where that learning curve comes in. So you may say, like, what is call MD4? Well, they talk about that on Bootstrap. So if you are interested, you can absolutely learn about how that looks. Now, there is a page here that gets into that grid system. Okay, I will find that for you a little later. But what's important here is that all three of these columns have to add up to 12. So for example, I can make the middle one bigger by making the side one smaller. So 3 and 3 equals 6, plus another 6 equals 12. So now my middle section will be a lot larger. But what if I want to start using DevExpress in here? So let's do that. Let's get rid of this guy here altogether, and let's add a grid in here. And I want to make this 10 columns. We'll make this thing like 2 columns wide. Now, by doing that system here, the CSS and media queries that are built into Bootstrap will handle responsive behavior for you. So you don't need to use DevExpress panels. Now, here, what I'm going to do is let's add our DevExpress grid view control. So we'll go to DevExpress ASPX grid view. We'll add that in here. And let's go to design view. So in design view, we're going to bind this to a new data source. Now, I'll use SQL data source, create a new connection, VPC MH dev/SQ. For some reason, my instance of SQL Express requires me to enter the full name here of my machine. I'll use the hotel booking, which is a database we created for our hotels demo, which is a very awesome demo. You want to check it out. All right, so now I'm connected to hotels. What I'm going to do is I want to show off a set of hotel names. So I've got a table in here called hotels, and from it I'll choose something like hotel name, room count. Let's go with postal code and maybe phone. Okay. Now, these are kind of what I would just short amount of items I want to show off. Now, remember I mentioned that you want to use the properties. So the first thing I want to do is I want to set the width to 100% for the grid so that it fills up the column. And the second thing is, if I have a lot of data, I'll set the settings pagers enable adaptivity to true. Now, for backwards compatibility, we don't just make the option by default enabled, and that's because you may have a website and you may say like, well, what happened, right? So the first thing I recommend, well, let's first take a look at this in the browser and see how it looks. Now, the default theme for DevExpress is not going to match Bootstrap's, and that's because, as I mentioned, Bootstrap didn't exist, before when we create our controls. So DevExpress offers these beautiful, professionally designed themes, and some of them kind of match, and that's probably one of the hurdles. Now we are going to improve that story. We're going to make that story a little bit better in terms of when you work with other frameworks, can you have similar themes? For now, I think you can have a similar theme by using one of the other DevExpress themes. So for example, if we go to the web config and set up and use a different theme rather than the default theme, something like, let's say, the Moderno theme. I think Moderno matches pretty closely. So, for example, you'll see Moderno looks really good. And what's great is, as we resize, the Bootstrap made that first decision and said, oh, this div is not going to fit here. I'm going to pop it down here, right? And as we go further, it collapses. So, as you can see, the DevExpress story, even with popular frameworks like Bootstrap, is great. You can use our controls with it. You may not need a menu because Bootstrap has a menu control built into it, but if you'd like, you can do that. Now, I believe there are some advantages with using the DevExpress approach. Now, for example, if you are not familiar with Bootstrap, but if you are, and I think probably MVC developers are probably the ones that are most likely to be using this platform already. So you may want to just say, okay, well, I can start working with that. So the other thing I want to mention is Bootstrap has a set of themes already. So if you go to bootswatch.com, there are a whole set of themes available that you can incorporate, and they're really easy to use. So for example, if I wanted to get cerulean, I want to use a dark look or a flatly look, let's go with this Lumen look. I think this Lumen actually matches pretty closely with the DevExpress Moderno theme. Now, all I have to do, if I want to incorporate this, all I have to do is copy this bootstrap.min CSS and bootstrap.css. And if you're using like less or Sass, you can actually download the files for that, the precompiler files for that, and generate the CSS yourself as well. But for now, I'm only going to download these two. Now, for the sake of time, I have downloaded these, and I've got them in a separate project. So I've got them in something like, I believe here, web application, content. All right, so I apologize. I got them in one of these. Okay. I believe that's the one we're working on, so that can't be it. All right, so let me just copy over a couple of those files. We can see that the web application is going to update very easily. So in our content folder, we should have bootstrap.min. Now let's take a look here. Now as I update those files, you'll notice that Firefox, whenever you change the CSS, automatically updates as well. So I'm going to copy over into my content folder those versions of the files, replace them, and as soon as I replace them, you saw it updated. And that's a great thing, is that it's very easy to update Bootstrap, and now you can see it matches really closely with the type of grays that we're using and so forth. So like I said, Bootstrap is very nice. I've used it. For me, if I was making a choice today, I might go with the DevExpress. If I was making a ASP.NET website, server-based website, I think the DevExpress panels are great. And I want to address one thing is, one of the things is that you saw the panels right now, what they do is they allow you to make a choice that says, listen, when I have this much content, this is what I want you to show. So we actually, the menu, we made a copy of the menu. So we were showing a second menu. It's a different menu. So that top menu bar that you saw earlier from the DevExpress panel control wasn't actually a menu control. And so I just want to talk real quickly is that we have plans in the future to improve the adaptive story. So in 15.1, it's going to get even better. What's great is you've got a full story now to start using this. Now, I thank you very much. I hope you stick around. We're going to do some questions. I know it's already 11, so let's take some questions. And before I forget, I want to say, happy holidays. Oh, and one last thing I'll leave you with, something I always talk about, less is more. And there's a quote by this French writer that said, perfection is achieved not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away, which means just enough. Get it enough on your website. You don't have to have the bare minimum. That's crazy talk. These people that says, look at my desk, there's nothing on it. That's crazy. My desk is a mess. So listen, enough on the website that has the necessary functionality. But if it doesn't serve a function, don't bother with it. Don't just have an image that does nothing, right? For example, for me, some of these hero graphics on these websites have gone crazy. Just a giant image with some giant text in it, and you're like, okay, I get it. You want me to click on it, but unless it serves a function, if you're a marketing site, that's perfect. That's what it should do. But if you're a functional site, don't do that to your users. The users may want to get some work done, and they may need you to show some editors or something like that. So anyways, that's my last takeaway. It makes it much easier when you're designing your website. So thank you very much.
All right. So thank you, Mehul.
Thank you, Amanda.
All right, everybody, you can register for all of our upcoming webinars and watch our past webinar recordings, which includes all of our Launch 14.2 content at devexpress.com/webinars. And we do have webinars scheduled into February 2015, so you can register today. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Mehul. Thank you for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.